Welcome everybody. For anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Maria Flaherty and I'm an ADON in the NMPDU in North Dublin. And I want to welcome you all to the last in a suite of 8 research webinars held by the NMPDU in North Dublin. And this webinar is titled Making It Happen, Academic Writing. I'm facilitating the webinar on behalf of the NMPDU today, and I would like to thank and welcome our colleague Kate Irvine, Professor of Clinical Nursing based in DCU. Kate has been instrumental in making all these 8 research webinars happen, which we are very grateful for. All the webinars are going to be uploaded on the HSE website under the NMPDU North Dublin, and they're also already available on the DCU website. We'll be taking a break about 2:45, back at 3 o'clock and finishing at 3:30. As Kate has already said, the webinar is recorded, and if everybody can continue to please mute themselves, and if you have any questions or anything, please put them into the chat function and we'll deal with them just before the break. We will be sending out an evaluation form. My colleague Lorraine Dillon will send out an evaluation form next week with regards to this webinar. And I'll say hello to Yvonne from the Mater Hospital. I just see you there. Nice to see you again, Yvonne. I'll hand over to Kate, and I hope you all enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. That's great. And in the nicest possible way, it's lovely to be coming towards the end of this series of webinars, and I hope that they've been useful to more people than have always managed to get to them. Hopefully the fact that they're there online and can be accessed. I was just saying to Maria there before we came on live, there is a resource on HSE land, academic writing for nurses, and I tried to click on it yesterday. I was just looking around at what there might be that I could recommend. I tried to click on it and I couldn't make it play. So Maria's going to have a look into that, and we'll certainly link that in with the webinars if that resource is still available on HSE land, because it seems they have got some really good quality resources there. So it seems like a waste if it's not used. And I have a sense, and that's why I was trying to look at it yesterday, was because I have a sense that I would say some different things than would be on such a resource, and not that that would be wrong or I would be wrong, but I just have a particular take on academic writing, because for me it really matters very little what you say unless you get straight in your head what you're trying to argue. It's like, what claim are you making and what's the backing for your claim? And to me, once anyone I'm working with becomes clear on how they make an argument and what are the building blocks to making a good argument, academic writing is not really, there's some things, and I'll talk about those, phrase banks and things that can be used to help you as kind of aids and crutches in your research. But actually, it's once you have a really good handle on what argument you're trying to make and what the backing is for that argument, then your writing will be convincing. It will be really good. And so I want to spend most of the time for this 45 minutes talking about argumentation and how you make a good argument. So I know quite a few of you who are here and where you're at. Yvonne, I know you and what you're up to in the matter there. And Ashita, I know you, but Jay Bracken, I don't think I know you. Could you tell me who you are and why you're interested in academic writing? Am I putting you on the spot? Amitha, you've got your camera on, so you're not shy. You tell us about you.
Thank you. I'm practice development nurse in St. Francis Hospice, Dublin. And my interest is, like, to be honest with you, when I did my graduate diploma in 2011, I was very naive to this style of academic writing because I'm from India and our system is completely different. The academic writing or the paraphrasing, all those things, I was very naive. And to be honest, I'm still kind of in that phase. I don't think I have improved much, but I would like to go back to thinking of going back to college and doing a master's in education next year. So I just want to refresh my my knowledge in this field. Plus, I'm very open. So and I was looking forward to the session as well.
Excellent. Thanks. That's great. And Brian, you're no stranger to academic writing. You've published, I think, in the past. So why are you interested in listening to anything I've got to say?
Because I wanted to complete the series, Kate.
Excellent. Well, let's hope I can say something that will tweak your interest. Jackie, are you able to tell us a bit about you?
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry I went out and then came back in again now. Yeah. I am advanced nurse practitioner, works in the Mater. I will actually put on a video if I'm looking good. Hi. Oh, my camera is not really sitting properly, to be honest with you. Ah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did masters now recently. And then I'm not too good, to be honest with you, still not really right, good with the writing. I will put my hand up because probably our background is like we used really the exams, a lot than the writings. And I want to do a couple of posters and things like that, and I probably struggle a lot. So I said, like, this would be a good thing to go up. I know I did my masters, but it's now going away as well from me. It's refreshing. It's really good, to get some knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, and I see Jackie in the chat there. Thank you so much for letting me know. She's a CPC and she finds academic writing intimidating. So hopefully I can help with that. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Share. And hope that you can see that academic writing. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes, Kate, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right then. So as I said, I think that most things in life can be an argument, and this isn't an argument as in, fight you might have with somebody, but in all things, there is a sliding scale of a good or a bad argument being made. Let's say even something like making an argument that somebody has TB, but there's a pretty good argument for that, and there's a biomarker and things. So for me, that's a good argument, but it's not, when you come onto something like an argument about whether somebody has, I don't know, dementia, that's a much more tenuous argument, and there's lots more facets to that type of argument. It becomes much more interesting. And most things in life, and I'm going to give you some examples, and you'll see what I mean by this. And we don't question their arguments. People are making claims, but we're not questioning those claims as much as we should. And if we did, we'd be really, really annoying people, but also we'd be much sharper at spotting arguments that are really bad arguments that we should really be pulling people up on. And I guess as an academic, that's my job, is to find people's arguments and have they made them, are they arguments well made, and are they supported by the evidence, and all of that is kind of what I do. So an argument is expressing a point of view on a subject and supporting it with evidence. And this is the main aim of academic writing. So even things, like I said, that we could take for granted can be arguable. So facts change. So, consider that once bloodletting was considered to be a really good thing for people with a whole range of illnesses that we now know bloodletting is not good for. And so-called facts can also be manipulated. So if you think about smoking was often recommended for people who had very chesty coughs. The things that are facts can change over time, and they can be manipulated by external influences. And so we have to be really skeptical of any claim that is made at any point in time. And then there are the arguments that are not wrong, but they go off in a funny direction. So, you see, I use dementia as my example, so obviously it's the subject I know best, but consider the claim that people with dementia require more support. Okay, so that's a fairly well-supported claim. I can find quite a lot of evidence to find that people with dementia struggle, and people with dementia have poor outcomes. People with dementia who get admitted to acute services have difficult, poor outcomes. So we can make a claim that they need more support. But oftentimes that evidence that people with dementia need more support is used in support of another argument that is not the point of that argument is there's a need for more support. It doesn't entail an argument about what type of support. And oftentimes that argument that people need more support is used as evidence to say, so you should fund my service, which is not necessarily the answer to that. It's not doesn't necessarily address the need that people need more support. That's a different argument about what type of support people need. So I'm trying to get us to hone in on the logic and the underpinning of the argument that is being made, and can it follow that this argument can be made from this point. So my point is, if you wish to be a better academic writer, you need to understand the concept of argumentation. So the point is, whenever you want to make a claim, there are kind of different kinds of claims. You can make a truth claim, you can make a value claim. So a truth claim is this is a fact. A value claim is this is important, or a policy claim that this should be done. And whenever you see one of those claims being made, you should ask, why do I think, or if you're making that claim, you need to think for yourself, why do I think that? What is my evidence for that? Then you need to clarify your thinking, think of the pros and cons for the position that you've taken. Can you think of a counter argument? What's the audience that you're appealing to? Will they understand all these counter arguments and the pros and cons and everything? And what would they be invested in? Because oftentimes in an argument, we're trying to convince people. So it's really important that we think about who our audience is. And then it's really important that we check ourselves that we've read this critically enough. And one philosopher who has come up with a kind of architecture, if you like, a strategy for making claims is a guy called TOULMIN. And he calls it a 3-part rhetorical strategy. And I think if you think of arguments this way, it will help you to break down what you're saying when you're trying to say anything really at all in academic writing. So the claim is your statement of belief or value or truth. So an example could be, it's important to spay or neuter your pet. So that's a claim that you could make. And then the data is the supporting reason for this claim. So a good supporting reason for that claim is millions of unwanted pets are euthanized every year. And then you need a warrant, so a justification that connects the claim and the supporting reasons. So in this case, pets that are spayed or neutered do not reproduce. And so that prevents the production of unwanted animals. So that's a perfectly logical argument there that follows. You've got a claim and you've got some data and you've got a warrant. And a warrant is the thing that links the data with the claim. So hopefully that's clearly illustrates the relationship between the claim and the data and allows the reader to follow the writer's reasoning. You may have a good idea, but your audience will want to know how you arrived at that claim or that viewpoint. The warrant addresses the inherent and often unsaid question. And more times than not, when I'm marking academic work, I put in the comments, why is this data so important to your claim? Because it's the warrant that's never given in academic writing. So you just make a claim, you give me some data, but you don't give me the warrant that links the data with the claim. And you think it's obvious, but I'm not in your head and I can't know what the link is between those data. I mean, sometimes it's obvious. And I guess in this case that I've given here, it is quite obvious, but also it's good academic practice that you write down what the warrant is, and then there can be no ambiguity about whether you want, because sometimes I wonder, do they understand the link between the data and the claim, or are they just parroting something out? So there are 3 parts to an argument, and if any one of those is missing, then you can't make an argument. The other thing that I often write is, what is your claim? Because sometimes people give me a load of data, but they don't tell me what they're claiming based on that data. So they're leaving me to make the claim for myself, which is not it's not a reasonable way of making arguments. So hopefully I've illustrated the relationship between the claim, the data, and the warrant, and why you need all 3 of those when you're writing an academic piece of work. it can be really, really useful. I haven't got reams and reams of these academic phrases to show you because, you know, it does depend what kind of claim you're making, or you know, there are hundreds of these academic phrase banks. If you just Google academic phrase bank, you will find loads of them that are free to go on and use. And they give you kind of examples, and you can use them if you're really stuck on how to word something. They can be really, really useful, particularly when you're starting off with your academic writing. So, you know, this first part of the first sentence, referring to the literature to justify a method or approach in a recent article, Smith, 2009, argues that, and then you put whatever comes next. So these phrase banks can give you a really good way of starting your claim. They can give you a really good way of phrasing something, and then you've got to just check you've got all three parts of the argument in. You can use bits of the phrase bank, but make sure you've got the claim, you've got the warrant, and you've got the data that links the two together. So I'm not going to go through each of these, but they're just examples. The sensitivity of the X technique has been demonstrated in a report by Smith et al. Any of these phrase banks, you can take out the names of the authors, and you can take out X technique and say a nursing intervention or something like that, and make that phrase bank work for you, for your data. And that can be really a really good way of just starting you off with your writing, because one of the things about academic writing is just starting off. When you have it's a very intimidating thing to have a blank sheet of paper in front of you and all these ideas in your head. When something is actually on that paper and it's no longer blank anymore, it's either got typing or writing on it, then those ideas that are in your head don't bully you as much. When they're just ideas in your head, they kind of push you around and make you think, I don't understand this. And it's only when you start to see it written out in black and white that you understand what it is you don't know and what it is, the gaps that you need to fill. So I will recommend that you write or type constantly and keep editing, because academic writing is an editing job. It's not, nobody writes it once and it's right. Every academic re-edits, and that is the process of academic writing. I want to talk to you about logical fallacies. Logical fallacies are completely illogical points that are very, very often made. You see them, once I point them out, you'll go home, you'll listen to the news, and you'll start annoying everybody you live with, going, that was a red herring, that's a straw man argument. The logical fallacies are things that cannot be claimed. They make no sense whatsoever, and yet they're said in all sorts of reporting, they're said in all sorts of academic writing, and we often have the wool pulled over our eyes. So I just have 6 different types of logical fallacies. So these are arguments that are not logical, that don't follow logic. And the first category is the red herring argument. So this is where they give you a big diversion and they intend to distract you away from the main issue, particularly by relating the issue to a common fear. So if we don't start training advanced nurse practitioners, we'll be replaced by generic healthcare workers. That's a red herring argument. It doesn't necessarily follow that we're going to be replaced by generic healthcare workers if we don't train ANPs. But it's an argument that I have heard made recently. So I just heard it and thought, that's a red herring. It doesn't necessarily, it may well be true, but there's nothing inherent within the argument that's being made there that is a true statement, and it's a meaningless thing to say, because there's nothing there that backs it up within the statement itself. And then you often see these straw man arguments, a weak argument set up to easily refute and distract attention from stronger arguments. So it's a little bit like the red herring, but they set up, and you often hear politicians doing this about the opposition policies. So you hear them saying an argument that's so weak, oh, well, if you want to vote for them, then sure, we'll all be on the soup line soon or something like that. It was just such a weak argument of the other version of events. So, you know, I've given you an example here. Look at the idea that criminals who commit murder should be released after a few years of rehabilitation. Think how unsafe our streets would be then. And of course, the safety of our streets has nothing directly to do with the first part of the argument there. And after a few years of rehabilitation doesn't quantify what that means or what that's like. It's just a really weak argument of what that process might be, and it's trying to prey on our fear of safety to kind of distract us away from seeing that that's not a logical argument. And then you've got circular arguments. So the proposition itself is used to prove itself, and it assumes the very thing it aims to prove. And modern circular arguments rely on a listener's belief, for example, in fake news, to claim that negative press is untrue. And once it's accepted, the person uses that acceptance to prove news coverage is untrue. So that's a circular argument. Another thing you often heard, a fallacy that you often hear when people make arguments, is an appeal to common belief of some people, often a prejudice, and states that everyone holds this belief. It's called also the bandwagon fallacy, as in people jumping onto the bandwagon of a perceived popular idea. And that's the ad populum fallacy. So most people would prefer to get rid of a few bad apples and keep our streets safe, is an example of this. I mean, it's all Donald Trump ever did for all the years of his presidency, was just say how other people are really bad, and you know, therefore it must be their fault. And everybody knows that the opposition are rubbish. So therefore, you're just appealing to the popularity of a particular idea. And then you have finally the ad hominem. Oh no, it's not final. I've got two more actually. The ad hominem argument. So this is just against the person again. Donald Trump did this all the time. Oh, Lisa must have made that drug error. She's so dippy. Of course, Lisa may well be dippy, but it doesn't mean there's no logic behind her being dippy and her having made the drug error on this occasion. Of course, that needs but that's going to, if people generally agree that Lisa is dippy, then people will be convinced by that argument, but there's no logical kind of basis for the argument. The non sequitur, so it doesn't follow, the conclusion doesn't follow from the premise, or the claim doesn't follow from the data. They're not related, so we need to do more paperwork to justify the staffing levels, but there's no relationship, there's no logical relationship between those two things necessarily. At least it's not inherent within that statement. And then you've got my particular favorite, which is the post hoc ergo propter hoc, which that means after this, therefore because of this. So it's just coincidental that one thing happened after another thing, and it's just a correlation. It's not necessarily a causation, but people are taking that as a causation. So violent death rates went down once they started publicizing executions. There's no necessity that those two events are linked in any way. So these are the ways that people try and use poor arguments, and I'd hope that you won't be using any of those in any academic writing that you would see, and I hope that you start trying to spot them. You know, and we'll have a try after the break. We'll have a try to look at a few ourselves. So the other thing I want to say about making arguments is that we're not logical necessarily. You know, people are not as rational as you might think. We're storytelling creatures. And if a story has fidelity and it seems to hang together, then oftentimes it need not be fully rational for it to be convincing. Emotions and narratives are not character flaws. They are part of being human, but they are very dangerous because they give rise to an over-tolerance of illogical positions. But sometimes the illogical position is actually an ethically correct position, So an excess of either logos, pathos, or ethos in any kind of argument is a poor argument. So we really have to try to appeal, when we're making an argument, we have to try to appeal to all of these types of an argument. So this goes right back to Aristotle, who said that any argument should have these three things. It should have some logic, it should have some ethos or some credibility, and it should also have some pathos or emotional appeal. And we should strive really hard to interrogate all our arguments and all of those of other people that we listen to see, does it have those three forms of appeal? So not a lot of people have more, let's say, you may well have been with lecturers who, when they're teaching, they really appeal to the logic. So they really make a very logical case, and they tend to have very well structured notes and very organized notes, but that can be less engaging. And I'm sure you're thinking back over lecturers you may have had in the past. And then you have other lecturers who tell lots of stories and really appeal to the emotional appeal, but they don't necessarily make things clear enough. And the problem with that kind of argument is oftentimes you sit and you enjoy a lecture, but you walk away from the lecture and you don't necessarily remember what was said in that lecture. And then the ethos, I mean, well, let's hope that mostly you've been to lectures where there's credible information being given, but you know, that would be backing up with relevant data and theoretical content as well. So it's really important that we don't have an overload of any one type of the sort of pillars of a good argument, that we really do think it through the logic of our arguments and we question ourselves. But ultimately, if we're trying to convince the reader, we need to appeal also to the pathos and the ethos. So we need to think about making sure it's logical inherently, that it's credible, and that it also does appeal emotionally to people. And that's when you think about the audience and who's going to read it. And I think that's possibly one of the hardest things for students to get right, is because the pathos, it tends to be lost in the hunt for the other two. So it's to stop and think, maybe when you've written whatever you're writing, why would anyone care about this? And to ask yourself that, and to look at your writing again with that question in mind. So arguments are the major tool that we have for getting funding, convincing examiners that you know your subject, or persuading people to support your request. So when you know that, you understand that arguments are fundamental to anything that you might have to write. And it's really important that when you're writing, you understand, what claim am I making? And so if you write a paragraph and you read that paragraph back to yourself and you can't answer that question, what claim am I making? Then you probably haven't made it clear enough what it is that you're trying to do. You've got to make a claim, state the evidence, and collect it with your warrant. Connect these two pieces, the evidence and the claim, together. So after we come back after the break, I've actually sped on through that, so that's good. We'll have a little break, and then we'll come back in 10 minutes and we'll look at can you spot the logical fallacies in some newspaper excerpts that I've got. So I'm just going to stop the share. Hold on a second. What I think is probably in the HSE land course is probably what you're expecting was, this is an introduction, and this is what an introduction has to do, and this is an abstract, and this is what an abstract has to do, and this is keywords, and this is what... Honestly, you can find that information anywhere, and you can follow it like a formula, and it's not difficult to do that. It's not difficult to find what is the function of each part of a paper. But the difficult thing is making the argument and making it all hang together and understand, what argument am I making? And once you get that bit clear in your head, the rest The rest is just a formula. The rest you just fit in to the parts of the parts that you're writing, whether it be a poster or an abstract that you're writing for a conference, whatever it may be. It must have a clear argument in it, and it won't get chosen if it doesn't. It just must have a claim, a warrant, and some data linked by the warrant. So are there any questions so far on anything I've said? Either write in the chat or...
I think, Kate, what you were saying there, the data, the claim, you know, and the warrant, I've never heard that before. And I just have to say, it's brilliant. It makes complete sense, you know. It's really good. And I think if nothing else, to get that across is brilliant. You know, it's the foundation of everything, really, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah. And I take every opportunity I can to talk to people about arguments. I think that, you know, the rest is kind of easy. If you have a good argument and you know what argument you're trying to make, that's actually half the problem. Lot of the stuff I read, if I don't like it, even things I'm reviewing for papers, say I review for a couple of Journal of Ethics and Nursing Ethics, sorry, and Dementia, that journal that's all about dementia. And when I reject things, it's normally because I'm not clear enough what claims being made with the paper, or else I'm clear of the claim and I don't see any backing for that particular claim. And you know, never is it the case if there's a claim being made and there's backing for it, even if I don't, if I can see a whole load of other backing, I can point that out. You know, if I can say, oh, you've missed this literature that says the contrary, I'll point that out to the people who've written it, and I'll ask them to make some major changes or minor changes depending on the size of things. The only reason I would ever reject something is because the claim isn't clear, or there's just no backing for. Or sometimes what people give you is backing for another argument, not the claim that they're making. So that little bit of architecture is gold dust, really, in terms of academic writing.
Do you know, Kate, what else is interesting is, and I've never heard it mentioned the way you have said it there, is it's the same for service improvement. It's the exact same for service improvement. People give lots of background, but they give a claim, but there's no background or there's no warrant, and it's not linked together. And if you had those three things for service improvement as well, they're key to success. So it's very interesting because it's really the same thing we're looking for, you know.
Absolutely. And any type of writing, whether it is for writing within a poster. And then the other thing is that looking at the pathos, because if you really want to convince people, we are storytelling creatures. So somehow, be it through an image, or I know I was just looking at one of the master students from last year came to the posters session, and she's doing a poster now. And she showed it to us yesterday. And now I'm saying to her, now what's the claim you're actually making here, because I can't see it. And I know there is it because it's in the masters. She made claims and she backed them up, but somehow it hasn't transferred into the poster. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it's so important, and it's a way of being your own checker, because you can go, what claim am I making? What's this paragraph saying? How does it contribute to the argument I'm making? And I often use it with early PhD students to say, you know, that you have to go through, as each paragraph has to have a note at the side of it, and you need to tell me what argument you think you're making with that paragraph. And that's a good discipline to get into, because if you don't know what that paragraph's in, it has no place in your argument or in your paper or poster or whatever it is that you're trying to make. Okay, should we have a little break? 5 minutes, take a comfort break? Well, should we come back at 1:45?